to episode 322 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Ash Baker,
and we are joined by the foremost Scooby Doo scholar of the world, Logan Kenny. Logan, thank you so much for coming back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I am so blessed to be here to discuss the king himself, Scooby Doo. Thank you for considering me as the expert. You reached out to me, and I'm very grateful for it. And I hope that I can use my knowledge about Scooby Doober and the Mystery Gang to help uncover the secrets behind
the people want to know things about Scooby Doo.
You can throw them at me.
We can't let them remain uninformed. Yeah,
I will accept all of the people's questions about Scooby Doo.
Everyone, quick, send us an email.
Well, we'll be recording this over the next hour and a half. So if somebody, 2 days later can send me an email during that time frame, we'll be sure to get to the Q&A section at the end of this podcast. But first, we got movies that we saw this week in part one, and then in part two, we will be talking about 1998's Scooby Doo on Zombie Island, the part of our Horror for Kids series. But let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. And Andrew, I'm going to lead off with you. You saw a pair of horror movies to, I'm sure, celebrate Spooky Month in October. So take it away.
That's right, I did. Two horror movies that pair really well with one another, and two horror movies that I know Logan is a big fan of, one of which he finally gave me the nudge I needed to watch, and that is the one that he encouraged me to watch was Twixt by Francis Ford Coppola, which Mike Thorne was circulating this thing on Twitter where he was having people pick their favorite horror movies of each decade of the 20th century and the 21st century, and Logan put Twixt as the best horror movie of the 2010s, and I was like, damn, I need to watch this movie. So I did. I'll talk about that one second, though. The other movie is John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, which it honestly is the one I prefer out of these two movies. Really, really loved In the Mouth of Madness.
So much ass.
I mean, it's as the title kind of suggests, it is a Lovecraft riff. Riff literally, because it has like this kind of rock guitar soundtrack that opens up the credit sequence. But this movie stars Sam Neill, who my wife would not like me to say on stream. She is referred to as a timeless cutie. But she's laughing in the other room. Sam Neill plays what is his role? Is he like an insurance guy? Logan, help me out. What is his job in this movie?
He is basically just like a corporate suit.
Oh yeah.
Kind of thing.
Letterboxd says he's an insurance investigator to like see if
all those jobs in my head are the same. Like insurance investigator, like corporate spin guy, like all of those things. He's like the definition of a big city. And that's what's important.
So he's doing this insurance investigation, which has brought him to this publishing house. And this movie is made in the 1990s. The heyday of the, like, I guess not the heyday, but like past the peak of like Stephen King's popularity. And so he's investigating the mysterious disappearance of this big pop pulp author who's not Stephen King, but is basically Stephen King. It's as if H.P. Lovecraft was transported into the 1990s and was able to amass the fame of Stephen King. And there's kind of two things going on with this author. One is that he has disappeared, as I said, and the other is that fanatics of his works have recently committed some public murders. They've just like killed random people in public.
It happens.
Yeah. So random like H.P. Lovecraft inspired mass shootings happening, right? It's a very interesting premise. And Sam Neill's character begins investigating. He has to start reading these books for the first time to kind of like wrap his head around like who this guy is. He ends up like finding this crazy secret code on the covers of his books, and which like he uses to create a map to find this like hometown of this author, not the hometown of the author, but this town that a lot of his books are set in, that doesn't really exist, but it does because he drives there, and when he drives there, everything is kind of strange, and the reality begins to kind of unravel around him. And the basic idea of the movie is that, reality is relative. Reality is a matter of what we as people can agree upon. It's kind of like the 1984 2 + 2 is 5 thing. And in the strange world that this author has concocted, everybody believes that the weird, like, eldritch horror shit that he writes about is real, which when Sam Neill's eyes are open to this, it just kind of like completely turns his world upside down, and he ends up in an insane asylum at the end of the movie, which is also, that's not a spoiler because it's framed at the beginning of the movie. I think that John Carpenter accidentally made a movie about QAnon. This is the only movie that I've ever seen that I was like, yep, that's about QAnon. Because I mean, it's the same basic premise that, like, if we can just get this strange fringe community to all like believe in this like shared reality that may or may not exist, we can kind of like bring that reality into everybody else's reality, right? In this world, and in The Mouth of Madness, we have like Lovecraft stands believing that Lovecraft is a prophet. In our actual reality we're living in, we have grandmas on Facebook believing that some random 4chan users are prophets, and in some cases going out and committing mass shootings about it. So John Carpenter's created this like really kooky out there movie, but in several ways we are actually living in that reality, and we're kind of just like carrying on as if everything is normal, or at least some people are carrying on as if everything is normal. So this is probably the horror movie I've watched this month that's kind of stayed with me the most throughout the month, because I keep seeing news stories and I'm like, yep, that's what happens in The Mouth of Madness. Like we were just talking on mic before starting recording that there was a news story that NASA's about to make an announcement about the moon, and I'm like, yep, that's something that would happen in The Mouth of Madness. Something's up with the moon. I don't know what it is, but it's fucked up. Moon's fucked up.
I just wish.
Yeah, we didn't bring you for moon experts.
I have no idea what's up with the moon. I will not comment on what's up with the moon, as I am not an expert on the moon. I am an expert on Scooby Doo.
Okay.
Yeah, if I was a moon expert, I would be making some money somewhere. But unfortunately, I have picked a career which I am very, very poor. But the thing about In the Mouth of Madness that really stands out to me is that it makes Apocalypse seem kind of badass. It's horrifying, and like especially near the end, it's like genuinely discomforting. But also, you hear those fucking guitars on the soundtrack, and you're just like, you know what? Yeah, let's go fight some demons.
Sutter Kane, that's the author in The Mouth of Madness. The only thing negative I'll say about this movie is that I don't love the effects of it. John Carpenter really knocked the whole practical effects thing out of the park with The Thing, and he goes back to the same well here, though I'm actually not certain how much of it's practical and how much of it's CGI. But it feels a little cheaper, and I guess he's like showing more of the monsters, and they're lit a little bit better than they often are in The Thing, I guess. So you can kind of see the strings a little bit more. It feels a little fake, but of course in a movie that's kind of about being confronted with something that's obviously not reality, but it kind of being reality nevertheless in a certain way. It does kind of fit. Anything else you want to add about this one, Logan, before I talk about Twixt?
Not really. I just want to say that if I had to pick, and honestly, I love In the Mouth of Madness for everything it does, but the thing that sticks with me most is that main theme. If there is, I think out of any horror movie ever made that I've seen, that everything I've ever heard, I would pick the theme of The Mouth of Madness over any other musical moment. It does something very primal. Like you listen to it and you can kind of understand like the kind of cultish raves that these like devotees to Sutter Kane feel. Like the music kind of rides through your soul in that kind of weird, like apocalyptic, like frenzied way. And I think Carpenter really nails that atmosphere through the music, through the cinematography, and especially through the way that every element of his filmmaking blends together in the end. It feels like something monumental. I think about the ending of that film all the time. And I haven't rewatched it in a couple years, but it's just stuck in my head.
Oh yeah. The ending should not be spoiled. People have probably seen a GIF of the ending of In the Mouth of Madness, but they don't know it's from In the Mouth of Madness. And when you get there, it's very rewarding. That last shot.
It's just phenomenal. I love that movie.
So the other one, Twixt, like I said, these movies have a lot in common. They pair really well with each other. Twixt by Francis Ford Coppola is also about a writer in a strange, remote rural town where creepy shit happens. But in this case, the main character, Val Kilmer, is the writer in question. He is also kind of a Stephen King-ish author, but he's much less successful than Stephen King. He's kind of like maybe a Stephen King knockoff or something. He writes vampire novels. He's written countless vampire novels. He's tired of writing vampire novels. He's obviously a kind of career writer who just kind of cranks these out in a weekend and, you know, makes a chunk of change off of them and then moves on to the next like cookie cutter thing. But he wants to do something personal. He says he wants to do something kind of real. His agent is trying to push him to make yet another cookie cutter vampire novel. And he kind of finds a healthy compromise when he finds himself in this small town. He's doing a book signing in a hardware store, and he's approached by a sheriff or a deputy or something played by Bruce Dern, who tells him about this true crime that's happened in the town. I don't actually remember how long ago the crime was. It at times in the movie it feels like this was like generations ago, and at times it feels like it just happened. But that is one of the weird things about this movie. Time slips a little bit. One of the things that gets brought up in the opening narration, because there is an opening narration by Val Kilmer at the beginning of the film, he talks about the clock tower in this town. It has 7 faces on it, all facing different directions, and they all show a different time. So in this town, time doesn't really matter to the inhabitants. They don't really keep track of the time. We're just kind of living in the now. And Val Kilmer's character starts investigating this murder, and at night he starts having these strange, like, you know, nocturnal odysseys, where he's visited by a character played by Elle Fanning, who is in like blinding ghostly white from head to toe. She has this red mascara around her eyes, and they've done something with prosthetics or CGI to mess with her teeth. She has these really long front teeth, and this like really intense like headgear, really intense braces. So when she smiles, it's a little off-putting. And these nocturnal sequences where he's just walking around the town at night through the woods are really strange. They're very transportive. The movie is shot in digital cinematography. This is 2011, and Francis Ford Coppola is kind of experimenting with different types of digital cinematography. We kind of talked about the way he played around with digital and film and practical effects and like the early days of Hollywood in Dracula. And this is like he's kind of cranking that to an uncanny, uncomfortable degree. Everything looks extremely crisp. Everything looks hyper real. It looks like you're looking through your own iPhone, like trying to take a photo of something. And as a result, at times it doesn't really feel cinematic. It looks like you are just kind of watching, you know, a document of Val Kilmer walking around this town. But of course, the things you're seeing are very strange. There's this blue kind of ghostly aura that emanates throughout the town. The way that night looks on screen isn't actually how night looks. It's kind of this silvery gray rather than, you know, dark shadows. And whenever color appears, as it does whenever supernatural things happen, he kind of has these phantasmagoric encounters. The color is extremely bright and high contrast. There's a lot of just like eye-popping red that doesn't make sense in the darkness that the characters are experiencing. And so on these walks, in these like nightmare dream sequences, whatever you want to call them, he kind of encounters the killer and the victims of this mass murder that he's writing about. From there, it's a little confusing to me, honestly. I don't know if I fully grasp what this movie is doing. It is, like I said, very uncanny, very off-putting, kind of winding and strange. And honestly, it kind of messed me up a little bit. I was already in kind of a bad headspace watching this movie, but it is one of those films that people will describe as disturbing, as a compliment, but because that's kind of what horror fans do, like, oh man, this movie was really fucked up, this movie was really disturbing. But I don't think most of the time people actually mean it, because if you were genuinely disturbed by something, you probably wouldn't also enjoy that thing. And that's kind of where I am with Twixt. I do think I admire the movie for how effective and weird and unlike anything else it is, but it actually unsettled me in a way that I'm like still not fully comfortable with. Logan, this is your favorite horror movie of the 2010s. So what am I missing, or what else do you have to say about it?
Well, I'm gonna have to I understand the disturbing aspect very clearly. It doesn't personally disturb me, but I see it in every element of its construction. It is very haunted. There's nothing quite like it, and what it's about is it's not blunt, but you feel it. You feel it in your core what it's about. Even if you don't understand the plot, you feel like the ghosts and the sense of like regret and everything about the art. But I think it is. I think it's very cinematic. And I think there's shots about Twixt that I think about every time the movie's name is mentioned. I can name like 10 different shots, especially in the clock tower.
And when I say it's not cinematic, I really mean it doesn't fit most people's like stereotype in their head of what a movie looks like, right? Obviously, what Coppola is doing here is a type of visual art that you can only do with cinema. So it's literally cinematic, but it's in such its own way.
It is shot. Okay, I agree with that. It is shot unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. Especially like the way it uses shadow and color grading in the clock tower, or even just walking at night with Elle Fanning, the way her skin is lit compared to the shadows of the rest of the environment. It's just something completely alien like. But what I think about Twixt is that it's not a film about a mystery about a small town. It gives up that pretense immediately. What it is about a person interrogating themselves through their worst nightmares and their worst fears. It's about Kilmer. He confronts the death of his child. He confronts his failures with a writer, with the Edgar Allan Poe monologues and conversations in dreams.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention there's also like a real writer in this movie where he like walks around and talks with the ghost of Edgar Allan Poe.
Really, yeah. And it rules. Edgar Allan Poe is possibly the nicest presence in this entire film, which is very, very strange. But like, he's confronting his failures as a writer compared to like a horror master. He's confronting the things he doesn't know about life, like all the ghosts that he'll never find out, all the stories, all the mysteries he'll never know the answers to. They all kind of grapple away at him. Like the film feels like a process of disintegration, as well as like the process of rebuilding this broken man. He is like facing everything he's ever went through, in this strange place with more history than he'll ever be able to grapple or understand. And the way that Coppola films it is there's moments of brief, overwhelming, loving catharsis in the midst of just pure black. Like the shots of him near the end of the film, in dreams, seeing positive memories that are now tainted forever by tragedy. But for a second, he looks at these images and he sees how he felt at the moment instead of what came after. And I think there's something very personal to Twixt because of like the situation what happened with Francis Ford Coppola's son in the 80s.
Which I didn't know about until I read your review.
I didn't know about it the first time I saw it either. But I did feel that kind of loss. And that was a point when I saw Twixt for the first time, I hadn't lost anyone major in my life, but I felt it. I felt what it felt like. And sure, there is like the kind of like, you're experiencing how you remember it and not exactly how it felt. But at this point in time, I think the feeling I felt watching Twixt after it was over and the feeling of thud when you realize that the person that you love is gone, there's a similar kind of weird transfixing horror in it. There are no traditional real jump scares in Twixt. There's no real spooks. Nothing really happens to Val Kilmer in terms of like physical danger. It's just that kind of overlapping dread of having to live with everything you've ever fucked up and all the things you'll never get to see again, all the moments you'll never experience again, all the things you'll never become. And you're just sitting there in this weird ghost town and you don't have any answers. So you just leave it and you do another fucking book and you move on with your life. But there's the thing that stands out to me as well about Twixt is that there's weirdly really funny bits in it. Like Bruce Dern's entire performance is this kind of constant switch between absolutely like unhinged and deeply funny to me. Something about the way he performs is just very funny. Also, everything that involves the biker known as Flamingo, played by Han Solo.
Oh my gosh. Alden Ehrenreich is in this movie.
Yeah, and he's a demonic biker, and we don't know if he's real. We don't know what crime he committed. We don't know anything about that really. There are like brief like correlations back to like this abusive like foster father, and Flamingo's just kind of on the outskirts as like our representation of the outcast of society, whereas like the people within like conventional society are beating and torturing their own children, and Flamingo's just chilling on a bike. But the film's not really about that in much as it's just another like addition to the thesis statement of Kilmer's like lost approach to the world. Like he doesn't feel connection or solace with anything, and there is an element of, I think honestly the stuff going into the background of the town is more to do with his alienation of everything. Like he can't trust the past. The past is so unreliable, and the past is so filled with people that are considered good men doing horrible things, and everything that happened in his life is just tragic. And the way that I'm describing might make it sound like this weirdly bleak movie, but it doesn't really feel like that until afterwards. It's just such a strange thing where while you're watching it, you can't really process exactly what it's doing, what you feel. And some people might just turn off and be like, no, immediately distaste to it. But I think for a lot of people, it just kind of lingers on. And I think about it all the time. It's not my favorite Coppola, but it's close. And it's a work of art that means a lot to me in ways that maybe he would never have expected. But I'm very glad it exists, and also it captures the vibe of like the spooky small town with mysteries that I've always loved. Like in Scooby Doo. Going to these,
like in Scooby Doo and Zombie Island.
Exactly. We'll get to it later. We'll get to it later. But that's the kind of vibe where I'm like, I really love like spooky towns with a lot of mysteries and shit like that. And even though Twixt doesn't care at all about the mystery, really, I love the vibe of it so much, and the thematic ideas that it explores through that atmosphere and through that setting is just like that and then add the aesthetic.
It's the atmosphere is doing the work. Yeah,
it's just so, it means a lot to me. And I am very very aware that most other people wouldn't call it the best horror film of the 2010s. It's between that and Lords of Salem, probably, for me.
Well, it's sad that the movie's not really streaming anywhere or even available for rent. So you'll have to, find some nefarious purposes to access it. But
Or DVD.
yeah. Is there not a DVD at all?
I have a DVD.
Oh, you have a DVD. Okay. Well, maybe you got to go buy the DVD if you want to watch the movie.
It's worth buying a DVD or some other methods.
Right. Definitely like a thing worth grappling with, especially if you watched Dracula with us last couple months ago. Yeah.
Oh, Dracula kicks so much ass.
Yeah.
I'll tell this off mic, I think. There's a very funny story with me in that movie. That I don't think is suitable for the podcast.
Sure.
But
we do have a lot of children listeners, so
yeah, famous appealers to 7+ Cinematary. But yeah, I love that movie.
Cool. Well, next, I'll reference to go to cinematary.com, as Logan has a number of reviews from the London Film Festival this year in a dispatch that is on the website now, so you can catch a lot of them there. But we got some time, so let's go over a couple highlights for you. The first one is One Night in Miami, which I also caught at TIFF. In this film, it's directed by Regina King, who I'm sure people know from many things. She's, it's Regina King. But the film is a adaptation of a play, and it's about this fictional night in February 25th of 1964 in Miami, where you have Cassius Clay, Jim Brown, Sam Cooke, and Malcolm X talking about the civil rights movement in a hotel room in Miami. So what did you make of this film, Logan? Because this is the first movie I caught at TIFF. I liked parts of it. I think I talked a little bit in my review that I like the kind of thought experiment of tossing all of these very well-known, outspoken figures through in history, all in this space, kind of dissecting this moment in time. But I also have reservations about it. But I know you're a big fan of One Night in Miami, and so I'm curious about your thoughts.
I really, really liked it. I've thought about it a lot since it ended. I enjoyed it immensely while it was going on. And I think that there's a lot more to it than I think a lot of its detractors or people that are just kind of like, it was all right, we'll give it credit for. I think there's something really interesting that Regina King does behind the scenes. There's something about the way it's shot and the way it's edited that makes it feel more than just about One Night in Miami. Like, obviously in the dialogue, it's about like these figures of like history, these larger than life men who will live on forever in documents and people's hearts and perceptions, and all these works and all these forms of how people are remembered. They exist more than just human beings at this point, especially men like Cassius Clay, aka Muhammad Ali, and Malcolm X, who are they are figures now. They are not as much people as they are ideas and like figures to put other people's ideas onto and shit like that. And they're all talking about something that is so large, so huge, so relevant, and that has parallels to today, obviously, which is a big reason of why it's being made. It's because these conversations that these four men are having in this hotel room are still relevant in 2020. So obviously it's about something more than just one night. But the way that Regina King shoots it makes it feel like this timeless event. Like this is just a place outside of time. Like takes place almost over decades. Especially with the final, like the editing near the end, where it almost feels like this conversation was a microcosm of decades of experience, not just for these four men, but for every single person that's ever had to deal with racism in America. It almost feels like a document of that entire time period, just through this, mainly just through one conversation. And I think the way that she shoots the location and the way she shoots the perspectives, what details she focuses on in the actors, like how their positioning and the environment changes, it feels very cinematic to me, even with the limitations of like the screenplay. And I think a lot of people, and I get it, because festival coverage is tiring and people just want to go home or not go home, but take a nap. So it's easy to just be like, the theatrical staging of the film limits it from feeling cinematic or something like that. But I think there's a lot more to it in the little details, and especially in the way that the editing is utilized, which made it stand out to me.
Yeah. Well, for me, in terms of like the kind of, when I say it's kind of theatrical, I don't necessarily mean that like as an insult. It was more like it has. I guess I disagree with it feeling like it's kind of taking place out of time and space. Like it feels very rooted in reality. I mean, so the movie is like an hour 45, 2 hours long, and it kind of it has like this for lack of a better phrase, like a preamble with kind of introducing each figure, as well as kind of introducing Cassius Clay through his fight with Sonny Liston, which is the preimpetus of all like the conversation and them being in Miami and etc. And it does kind of like it kind of wants to couch you with the fact that there's a possibility that these guys knew each other and had a conversation along these lines, which is possible, is probably is most likely unlikely, but it's possible. And to me, I kind of view this as like it's like an experiment. It's that whole, if you can invite 3 people, dead or alive, to dinner and like talk about stuff, who would you invite? And it seems like kind of like that. And to me, it almost needed to be even more separated from reality in order to kind of lean into that, because it's constantly reminding you that there is stuff happening around it, not in terms of like the ideas or the concepts that they're bringing up, but more that real life is taking place outside the boundaries of this hotel room, which whenever they're in the hotel room, I agree, like whenever they're engaging with these ideas, because these are also like, these are figures who like the decision to have Malcolm X in it rather than Martin Luther King Jr. is interesting. Malcolm X is not somebody who's generally portrayed not only just on screen, but like his ideas on screen very often. And then you put Cassius Clay and specifically Jim Brown, like 2 athletes, I think is also, it was kind of fascinating to me, because these are guys that differ in terms of like how outspoken they were about their experiences. They're much more in tune with the modern athlete of Colin Kaepernick or LeBron James, who are very outspoken about their beliefs. And that there's kind of like this difference between that and the people who came before, who are kind of in between the Cassius Clay, Jim Brown generation and the LeBron James, Colin Kaepernick generation, which was much more quiet. And so there's a lot of things going on in this movie that I find interesting, but I also just feel like it's constantly trying to remind you that we're in reality, and it almost needed to be like it was in a dream, just to kind of focus more on the ideas and less on what was going on around them, if that makes sense.
I get. What I meant with the like seeming out of time thing is mostly as it goes on. Like there's rooted in context, obviously, but the longer the conversation goes on, the more it feels like a thesis statement for the entire era, and it almost feels like that, especially when it cuts back to the Sam Cooke performance, which is my favorite scene in the film. When it cuts back to the Sam Cooke and the audio all dies out, the band isn't playing properly, the microphones aren't working, and he like emboldens the crowd to sing along with him and channels this like cathartic moment just through his voice, just through his presence. And I think there's something that, as soon as that moment happens and you see it cut back to Leslie Odom Jr.'s face, that just feels like it's hard to really articulate, because there's a lot going on in this movie that I think I wasn't particularly expecting. But I think that
I was gonna say all 4 performances are fantastic. I'll say that. Like they're all really, really good.
But I think the interesting thing about it to me is that all of these moments that happen, like there's so much focus on the past, so much focus on what happens afterwards, that it just feels like this embodiment of the generation, which is what makes it most interesting to me. And I think the way that that Regina uses the editing where whether it's cutting back to Sam or the montage afterwards just feels this it just like it captures the feeling of something like this is a very very strange comparison, but like the feeling of boyhood, where after boyhood's over you feel like you've just actually seen 20 years of time reflected into one moment. It's like that encapsulated into a night for me, where I felt it. I felt the era. I felt the things changing, even though so much has still stayed the same. You feel the differences just through like this one conversation. And I think the way that it interrogates all four of these men's relationships with each other, whether they exist or not, based off of their like public personas and the way that they handle civil rights. It's just such a fascinating thing. And I think in a lot of other circumstances, it could have felt very fan fictiony, like, oh, look at this, or like what you said, like the three famous people dead or alive from history. It could have felt like that, but to me, it feels almost honest, even though it is inherently like fake. There's just something about it, and I think the way that Regina shoots the room, shoots the faces, cuts between them, there just feels like there's such a rhythm there, and it made me want. I do really want to see the play just to see the differences, because I'm sure like there are different thematic and narrative and particularly dialogue focuses that you get from that more stripped back completely environment. Um, but to me, they're just. Oh,
No, I was
sorry.
gonna say, I guess because I agree, agree with what you're saying for sure. It's just like let's. I was almost like let's get more of that. You know, it's the it just it kind of dawdles around for the beginning, kind of going. This is where Malcolm X is at this period in time. This is where Cassius Clay is at this period, and I'm like, yeah, but I feel like you can kind of work off of who Jim Brown is just vaguely. You know who
I did not know who
Sam
Jim Brown is, so this is actually
that
very
is
helpful.
okay.
Because that's an American icon, Jim Brown, not over here. I know about Malcolm X, I know about Cassius Clay, and I know about Sam Cooke, obviously, but Jim Brown, it was very helpful. So I think, and I especially think because, especially in like when you think about like modern history classes, like history classes, especially in the United States, they don't really care about black people and black history. From the experience that I've heard from friends of mine who have been in these places, like there's a lot of context that's erased. There's an interesting element to One Night in Miami where it is in between like historical like analysis of what they did and then the ideological discussion of what they represented, and these characters are representing both simultaneously in conflict with three others, and that shit is just fascinating to me on a primal level, like interrogating historical figures, what they said, what they did, and having them spar off with others. It could have easily not worked. It could have easily felt forced and almost laughable, but it's a testament to Regina, and it's a testament to the playwright, and it's a testament mainly to the actors for making it feel genuine. Like, I still think about the shot of Leslie Odom Jr. when it cuts back to him after the performance. I still think about that. Like, it's almost like he's getting lost in the performance just by thinking about it. That's just the importance of the art he does. And then you compare it to like the art he does and the impact he has, but he's doing it in a world that will never care about him as much as they would care about a white person. And him having to contrast the joy he feels from performing by what he represents in that state. I'm really, really grateful for One Night in Miami for not sanitizing any of the ideas that these figures had. Like, there's no attempt to Aaron Sorkin liberal it or anything like that, or make it just very centristy or diluted. It feels more honest than like many documentaries I've seen about the period or books I've read. Like, there's a biography of Muhammad Ali that I read that barely covers like the actual radical ideas of the Nation of Islam, which is just such a strange thing to leave out. But I think that there's just such there's just so much to it that like I want to see it again. Like, I actively want to see it again and pay even more attention to all the little details. Just because it takes this premise, and it takes this idea that could have been very very TV movie ish, and it makes it very invigorating to actually watch and to think about. Um, like, to me, and like it kind of reminds me, obviously very different subject matter, but it kind of reminded me the way that Mike Nichols shoots Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, where it is a very like theatrical setting, but the way that he moves the camera and what he chooses to accentuate in each performer makes it feel as invigorating as anything with more expansive cinematic scope. And I think Regina has a lot of potential as a director, and she's one of the finest actors that we have, as everyone knows. But if she's like half as good as a director, she's still great, and I think she's got a lot of potential. So I hope One Night in Miami does do really, really well, and that she gets to make other things.
Yeah, well, looking at it, it looks like it's going to be premiering, I'm sure, in streaming platforms later this year around Christmas. So One Night in Miami. Check out Logan's stuff on the London Film Festival on cinematary.com. Before we got a little bit of time, but I want to end on a fun note. And Ash, we need a Mads Mikkelsen dispatch. You got like 5 minutes, so give us that, and then we'll go home.
Yes. Okay. So I'll give you a really brief overview of this Mads Mikkelsen movie I watched this week. It's a Spanish movie from 2003. I'm probably going to mispronounce the title, but it's Torremelinos 73. That's a city in Spain. I Googled and found out. But so it's about... here's the thing about this movie. I was watching it because Mads Mikkelsen was in it, obviously. But
I was wondering.
He's only in, like, the last half of it. Like, and so I was like, this might be boring. Like, I don't get to look at Mads Mikkelsen for half the movie. And so I just gave the movie my attention, and it was actually like really fucking good.
Can you imagine a movie without Mads Mikkelsen being good?
I know. So it's based on true events. It's about this guy, Alfredo Lopez, and his wife Carmen.
Excuse me? His name is Alfredo Lopez?
Yes.
Okay.
So Alfredo and Carmen, Alfredo's an encyclopedia salesman. It's set in the 70s, by the way. But so he's an encyclopedia salesman, and Carmen works at this like beauty salon or whatever. But anyway, since the encyclopedia door-to-door sales business isn't so hot, they like don't have a lot of money, and Carmen really wants to have a baby, like, so bad, but she's upset because Alfredo is like, we don't have enough money for a baby, and it's just sort of like give hints at being vaguely sexual in the beginning, and then Alfredo goes to work and gets called into his boss's office, and everyone thinks like, oh no, he's getting fired because he's like not selling any fucking encyclopedias. And so he goes into the office, and his boss says, we only have 4 encyclopedia salesmen left. Basically, encyclopedia sales are out. What's new is like audio-visual distribution. And so basically he tells Alfredo that he can keep his job and actually make like $1 bazillion if he and Carmen make like pornos for a quote-unquote like like audio-visual sexual encyclopedia. Like,
this is made for an audience of one. Ash Baker.
and so I'm gonna get to that, but so basically it's like quote-unquote for science, but basically just like a nice excuse to make porn. But it's like specifically they're like, okay, so you'll make $1 bazillion, but it's not going to be distributed here. It's only going to be available in Scandinavia, is basically what it is. And so they're like, they finally agree to do it because she wants a kid and he's just like fucking desperate. So the boss sends them to this retreat where they learn how to shoot a porno by Scandinavian, like very stereotypical a porn director and a porn star who, the porn director keeps talking about how he used to work for Ingmar Bergman and like learned filmmaking from him. And so he keeps saying like, oh, Bergman this and Bergman that. Oh, Mr. Bergman used to say this or whatever. And it's just kind of hilarious. And so anyway, Alfredo and Carmen start making all of these like dozens and dozens. They're pumping out the amateur porn and they're rolling in the dough. And so one day they're at the shopping mall and some like obviously Scandinavian guy comes over and asks for an autograph from Carmen on a porn magazine. And since he is like from Scandinavia, and they find out that she's like a sex god, like sex symbol in Scandinavia. And meanwhile, Alfredo has been like binging Bergman films at home and is like dreaming of becoming like a real auteur. And so he starts to write this like full like feature film script, and his boss is like, sure, like we can make it, let's fund it, you're doing great in the, you know, the audiovisual encyclopedia of human production business. And so so they go to make the film, but what Alfredo doesn't like get is that like his boss is like basically going to like make it into a porno, and he has hired like 5 Scandinavian guys to be his crew, and they are obviously all like porn makers, like producers / porn stars. And this is where Mads enters the film. He plays Magnus.
Mads' Boogie Nights.
I know. He plays a porn star called Magnus. And so basically the movie that Alfredo, like his magnum opus that he's trying to make, is like a big, obvious Bergman knockoff. And Magnus is playing Death himself, and he's going around in a black cape. And so like the climax of this movie is, and Carmen is starring in it. And so the climax of this movie is Mads Mikkelsen in a black, like Seventh Seal ass costume, fucking Alfredo's wife in a black cape.
Europe is weird.
It's fucking awesome.
Trust Europe.
It's fucking awesome. Highly recommend.
I mean, if the movie's going to make you wait for Mads Mikkelsen, it might as well give you that Mads Mikkelsen at the end, right?
Yeah, Magnus.
All right. Well, that was worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Stellar movie. Honestly, I loved it.
5 better than The Godfather.
It's fucking better than The Godfather. It's directed by a guy named Pablo Berger.
On that note, we're going to take a short break, try to, get ourselves back, on the track, because, whew. And we'll be back talking Scooby Doo on Zombie Island after this.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is your favorite Filipino podcaster, Jessica Carr. I'm here to let you know about a couple of things that Cinematary offers that you might not know about. First, if you're a fan of what Cinematary is doing, please consider joining us on Patreon. Remember when we weren't clamoring for your dollars? Well, now we're just clamoring for 5 of your dollars. So please help us and donate to our Patreon, and then you'll get exclusive content from our staff, including our film Theory and Chill series, where a panel takes a piece of theory each month and deconstructs it before diving into whatever topic is on their mind from the past week. The $5 each month is an investment in the website and the podcast, and it goes solely to paying our writers for the reviews each week, so please consider doing it. It's only $5. If you missed an episode of Cinematary or a piece of writing we've had, you should consider signing up for our free newsletter. Each Sunday, we send out a note with the latest podcast episode, piece of Patreon content, and the last 2 reviews that we've written at cinematary.com. It's perfect for those of you who are interested in what's happening, and it makes sure that you don't miss a single Cinematary review. Finally, the easiest thing that you can do to help us is to please give us a rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever else you're using to listen to the show. This helps us get more eyeballs and ears on the podcast and the website, and it helps the people know about Cinematary, which is really what we're here for. So to recap, consider donating to our Patreon, sign up for the free newsletter, and give us a rating or review. We would really appreciate if you could do these things. Thank you for listening, and now back to the show.
And we are back with part 2 of episode 322 of Cinematary. In this part, we'll be continuing our Horror for Kids series with 1998's Scooby Doo on Zombie Island. Directed by Jim Stenstrom from a script by Glenn Leopold and David Doy. Film stars Scott Innes, Billy West, Mary Kay Bergman, Frank Welker, and B.J. Ward. Scooby and the gang reunite in search of mysteries and adventure when they chance upon a remote island inhabited by an undead pirate and his zombie crew and zombie Confederate soldiers, for whatever reason.
Yep.
The Scooby-Doo franchise, which by the time of the film's release was nearing its 30-year mark, had entered into a period of diminishing returns in the early 90s.
Disrespectful.
After the conclusion of the 6th iteration of the series, a pup named Scooby-Doo, the character became absent from Saturday morning lineups. In 1991, Turner Broadcasting purchased Hanna-Barbera, the animation studio behind Scooby, largely to fill programming at a new 24/7 cable channel centered on animated properties, Cartoon Network. The advent of cable gave the franchise renewed popularity. Rapidly, Scooby reruns attracted top ratings. Zombie Island was not the first attempt at a feature-length Scooby adventure. Several TV movies were produced in the late 80s, starring the characters such as Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. A great name. In 1996, Turner merged with Time Warner, and David Doy, in charge of Hanna-Barbera, was tasked with developing projects based on the studio's existing property. Executives suggested Scooby, given that the property had a high Q score, and proposed it could be a direct-to-video feature film. The team assembled to work on the production were veterans of the animation business and had most recently worked on SWAT Cats. Let me make this clear. It's SWAT Cats with a K. Cats with a K.
Yes, I googled this because it felt familiar to me, and I definitely watched SWAT Cats as a child and blocked that out for.
Well, let's clarify.
Decades.
SWAT Cats, semicolon, the Radical Squadron, and the Real Adventures of Johnny Quest. Screenwriter Glenn Leopold had been with the franchise since 1979, Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, and the film director Jim Stenstrom had worked on Scooby projects beginning in 1983 with the new Scooby and Scrappy-Doo show. As the film was considered a one-off experiment by studio brass, the crew worked with little oversight and complete creative freedom. Doy and writer Glenn Leopold developed the film's story, with Leopold receiving sole credit for the screenplay. Much of the script is recycled from his script for the Leopold's script for the unfinished SWAT Cats episode, The Curse of Cataluna. Stenstrom, the film's director, suggested in early story meetings that the monsters in the film be real. Previous Scooby outings were nearly always bad guys in rubber masks. Leopold disagreed, noting that throughout the franchise's history, it always remained a simple, solvable mystery. Stenstrom felt this worked for a half-hour television episode, but might grow tiresome over a feature film length. Frank Welker is the only actor from the original series to reprise his role. He did so as Fred Jones. He had initially worried that the producers would replace him as well like the other actors, given that the producers believed his voice had gone down an octave. Japanese animation studio Mook Animation was contracted to work on the film. Doi had a relationship with the team at Mook, as they had previously collaborated on SWAT Cats and Johnny Quest. Hiroshi Aoyama and Kazumi Fukushima directed the film as well, but were not credited. And the team were allowed more time to work on the film with no real set schedule, but the American crew redesigned the series cast for the film, giving them an update on fashion. The team felt Fred and Daphne with their ascots and his bell bottoms felt particularly outdated. They briefly changed Shaggy's shirt color to red and gave him sneakers, though they quickly relented as they viewed his.
Can't do that.
Yeah, I know, his original outfit was much more timeless. And I threw this in just because I felt like Logan would appreciate it. In 2011-12, British comedian Stuart Lee dedicated an extensive section of his live show, Carpet Remnant World, to the, quote, Jungle Canyon rope bridges in Scooby Doo on Zombie Island, linking what he described as the state of such bridges with the neoliberal regime of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. I don't know where that's coming from, but sure. I just found that funny.
What an amazing comparison.
I know, right? The Chicago Tribune in 1998 said that called it a nostalgic hoot. Zombie Island resurrects all the touchstones of the original cartoons, including chase and song sequences to like Shaggy's hippie speak. But unlike the cartoons of old, this time the gang is not menaced by scheming crooks in monster suits. In Velma, to end now remember this was written in 1998. In Velma, to end speculation in this age of Ellen, thank you, meets a potential boyfriend.
Oh,
I know.
No.
In 1998, Entertainment Weekly said, of all the corpses on Zombie Island, Scooby Doo ain't one of them.
What does that mean?
Scooby Doo's not
It's
dead.
Entertainment Weekly.
So, because it's a property. It's a property that has been viewed as kind of like out of touch and out of date, and so they're it's not dead. It's still here.
I gotcha.
The heart is pumping. Oh.
All right, well, let's kick it off. Logan, give us a kind of a brief primer on your history with Scooby Doo, and then I guess why Zombie Island is one of the is a good selection for this series.
Well, when I was a kid, when I was a young child,
I said Breeze.
Okay, I'm trying my best here. Okay,
It all started when I was born.
I will keep it. It started on the early years when I was a small child with bright blonde hair, and there was this red box of DVDs that contained about 15 of Scooby-Doo movies and a bunch of the TV shows. And as soon as when I was 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I was fucking obsessed with Scooby-Doo. I loved that he was a dog that talks and solves crimes. I loved Shaggy. I loved how they were all friends. I loved the mysteries. I loved the animation. I loved the vibrance. They're all just so much fun. There's just such this infectious charm between how all the characters interact with each other. There's such a vibrancy to how they engage with the world. There's always an interesting atmosphere. There's always interesting side characters. I remember having Scooby-Doo try and solve the mystery books where you would choose your own response to the clues. You'd turn to a page, and if you were wrong, you'd get told you were wrong. And it was very deflating when I was young, and I thought I would be a good mystery solver. So fuck you. But when I was younger, it just made me feel happy. Like when you're growing up and you're a small child and you have no idea what's going on and everything's kind of overwhelming. I went to my bedroom and I would put on the Scooby-Doo DVDs and I would watch them over and over again. And that continued even till when I was 10 and 11. I would still watch Scooby-Doo. I was watching quote unquote adult movies. I was watching movies made for people much older than me, but I would still always be like, you know what, I want to watch some Scooby-Doo. And Zombie Island was the one that genuinely got to me when I was a kid, because I just thought that Scooby-Doo was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. With the older ones, I was like, this is a lot of fun. And then the more the franchise went on, the less focus has been put on fear, and the more focus has been put on the adventure. With like, there's not as many things like Zombie Island or Witch's Ghost anymore. It's more about like shenanigans and more inventive, colorful situations for mysteries to take place in. So I was like in that era where it was right in the middle. And when I first saw Zombie Island, I was like, fuck, oh my god. I am 6 years old and this is ruining my fucking day. Like the zombie, like the flesh, the animation of the zombies was so freaky to me as a kid. And the atmosphere of Zombie Island was just so lush and well presented. Like I felt like this entire island, I could picture it all in my head. It felt so real and so vivid to me. And all the supporting characters felt so distinct that they just became part of like my brain. I can still today, like even before I rewatched it earlier, I was just like, I can tell you every single like shot of the manor. I can tell you every bit what that looks like and what the exterior looks like, because it just had such an impression on me. And kind of like I had a similar experience with like Revenge of the Sith when I was younger. Is that was the one that always challenged me. Like it was still had enough of the comforting aesthetic that meant I watched it all the time, but there was this discomfort that lay underneath it that has ended up being very fundamental to the way that I look at movies. And especially for Zombie Island's case, what I kind of like about horror movies is that kind of like, especially like some of the ones that aren't like psychological, is that combination of like there's this charm and spirit in the midst of the spooks. And obviously the older I have gotten, Zombie Island no longer scares me the way it did when I was 6, but I still get that comforting joy watching it. Like I see it and I'm like, this just feels like home. It feels like being 6 and cuddled up with a plushie and in a blanket and watching it at home with some hot chocolate. It just feels so comforting, and that's the best thing about Scooby Doo to me, is that no matter what I'm doing, no matter how old I get, no matter what happens, there is such comfort in the formula of Scooby Doo that it will always be able to cheer me up. And I think Zombie Island is the apex of it for many reasons. I think it's the masterpiece of the Scooby canon. It has everything. But we'll get into that more later.
Andrew, do you have any history with Scooby Doo? What's your?
I mean, not quite as extensive as Logan's, I guess, but I definitely watched Scooby Doo all the time growing up, and I remember watching this probably shortly after it came out. I was 6 when it came out, and I think I like rented it at Blockbuster or something like that. And I remember, like Logan, this being the first Scooby-Doo thing to genuinely scare me. You know, Scooby-Doo is one of these franchises where, it seems mean to say that it's like a cookie cutter show, but it does have a very strict formula to it, to the point where like every episode uses the same soundtrack, and they're kind of just like alternate between these like 3 or 4 musical compositions. And you know, you can kind of tap your foot to a Scooby-Doo episode because it's just like so predictable in a way that, like you said, Logan, is very comforting when you're a kid,
which this movie kind of plays with. You know,
exactly.
It's pretty aware of it.
Yeah. I mean, the title sequence, I think it's the title sequence, the first big musical montage sequence is like you're watching a bunch of Scooby-Doo episodes on repeat. You know, the Ghost is Here sequence. They keep like finding monsters. Yes, they keep finding monsters and unmasking them. And so it's getting you comfortable in that space, and then all of a sudden, of course, there is the big reveal that like the monsters are real in this one. And as a 6-year-old, that's really scary. Halloween or watching Scooby-Doo is kind of like the experience of like going trick-or-treating, or you know, just experiencing the Halloween season, where we kind of have the aesthetics of horror all over the place, but you know you're safe. You know that nothing is actually going to scare you. You know, you're gonna see more or less the same thing every time, and it's ultimately going to be very like heartwarming and nice, and you're hanging out with your friends, right? And then this movie is not that, and of course it gets kind of ugly and somewhat violent in the way that like the transformations happen, and like you were saying, Logan, the way that the zombies are drawn, you can like see their ribs like sticking through their skin and stuff like that. It's pretty gruesome for a kid's movie, and so it's really stuck with me. I haven't watched it since I was a kid, so this is the first time I'm watching it in over 20 years. Unfortunately, I was a little let down by it. I wish it held up for me as well as it held up for you, Logan. But there is, there's still something kind of evocative about some of those moments, like the moment where the pirate ghost is like etching on the wall behind Daphne as she's doing her little documentary shoot, and the way they have to like rewind it and enhance to see the ghost hidden in there. I remember that being really creepy. Yes, now it's very silly, but it was extremely unsettling when I was a kid, and I still kind of see why it was unsettling, because of the way that it is, subverting your expectations. But yeah, that's mostly my thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm. Ash, did you have any connection to Scooby Doo growing up?
I watched the show. I don't remember seeing any of the movies so much, but I always liked the show in a weird way. I don't know why, but like the show, I always kind of felt like guilty watching it because my mom hated that I watched Scooby Doo, but I always wanted to watch it, but I always felt bad about it. So yeah, because ghosts and zombies and stuff. But my argument was they're never real. They're always just people in masks and stuff. And so I was actually really excited having watched this. I thought it was the first time, but as it went along, I kind of got like that weird kick of a memory. Like maybe I'd seen it once as a kid and just didn't really remember. But it was basically the first time in memory that I had seen it. And so I was really excited, I guess, that it was kind of like, oh, it's actually not a guy in a mask. I remember like in the very beginning thinking like, wow, they're really setting us up to like have a ghost that is like actually like real. Are they gonna follow through with that? And then they did, and I was like, wow, that's really crazy. It also, like, I loved the gardener in this. How, like, in the beginning,
the insanely muscular gardener.
That's my fucking point.
Well, he's fucking hot. First of all, they had no right. They had no right to make him that hot. And second of all,
where's
like,
the horny bat?
He's like,
yeah, go to horny jail.
He's also just like mean, and like they kind of set you up like, oh, it's probably the gardener who's doing this or whatever, because they just think, oh, it's just a guy in the mask, and it's like, it's that grumpy gardener. And you get to the end and you're like, no, he's actually just a bitch. Like,
well, there's also, isn't he a cop or he's a detective?
He's a detective. He's an undercover
detective.
That was like crazy when he was like, oh, by the way, I'm a detective. I was like, oh my God.
Well,
I'm just a bit of an asshole.
He is kind of a red herring. There's another even bigger red herring though. The guy who fights off the alligators at the beginning. Like, they're really setting that dude up to be the villain. Then he comes back at the end. I was like, oh yeah, that guy. I forgot about that guy.
Oh, the alligators guy is just a gag, which is the best part.
Yeah.
He just really fucking hates gators. And you know what?
Yeah, there were a couple of really funny gags in this movie.
The gags are so good in this movie.
We mentioned this one before we started recording, but every single time Scooby said, "Dog, where?" And then every single time he said, "Rats," I lost my shit.
Scooby is my favorite character in the history of fiction.
Oh my God.
He's just, he's the best.
The thing I was thinking about while watching this also is that it feels like the perfect, if somebody had never seen a Scooby Doo thing, or if, when they announce the moon stuff and it's that there's people living on the moon and we have to show them human life, and they were like, we want to see Scooby Doo. Like, this seems like the perfect, like, because it feels like it, going back to Andrew's point that it has a formula in place. This is one that it follows the formula, to a T, so that you're kind of getting that kick. But then it also is kind of playing around with the formula. Like, it's very aware that you are aware of, like, the story beats, and kind of tries to play off that a little bit. And it feels like, for fans of that, of what you usually get in a Scooby Doo TV show or movie or whatever, you're kind of getting that, but you're also getting something a little bit more. It seems just like that all-encompassing Scooby Doo experience, I guess, for lack of a better word. And this seems like the perfect encapsulation of, like, everything that you would come to expect from something Scooby Doo.
I would agree. The thing about Zombie Island is that it functions almost as sort of a rebirth as well. It takes the elements from, like, the classic shows, but it also takes things from stuff like Scooby Doo and the Harlem Globetrotters, or Scooby Doo meets Batman, where there is this weird, like, comedic energy to it throughout, but there's also these weirdly atmospheric moments that kind of, because of the longer form, because of, like, the Harlem Globetrotters one. I don't know if anyone has seen Scooby Doo It Meets the Harlem Globetrotters. You should, because it's fantastic.
I've seen
great.
the episodes of the show where they meet the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah, it's a compilation. They compiled it together into a movie here. And the way that the long form cut makes it work is that there's this kind of increased sense of ambiance to it. Like, the way the hallways are shot, the way these houses are embedded, even though it's an overtly comedic like, series of episodes, the way that the 2 or 3 or 4, I don't know how many episodes there were, because it's like a 70-minute feature here, but the way that they're all compiled together makes everything kind of stand out more. Like, every atmosphere, every location feels a bit more evocative, and Zombie Island is that to the next level, because it is designed as a feature film, is amplified to the next level, where it not only amplifies the formula to the next level, but it makes the aesthetic broader, the characters more deep, and it just gets to the core of why people have liked Scooby-Doo for all these years, and it set up a great course for the future, where these movies would become regular staples to this day. They still make them. They're not as complex as Zombie Island, but I've seen 30 so Scooby-Doo movies.
There are that many movies?
And I can tell you,
There are a lot.
there are tons of them.
Wow.
Yeah, because there's like direct-to-video, there's the live-action ones. There was two direct-to-video live-action ones with Robbie Amell and Hayley Kiyoko as Velma, which I've
Yeah.
seen. There's Daphne and Velma, which is another different live-action DVD film that I've also seen, which is Elon Musk is practically the villain of for some reason. There's tons of it.
He should be the villain in most things.
The movie is not very good, but the vibes are correct, and that's what counts. And then, like, when you look at, like, the classic, like, when you think of, like the Ghoul School, which you brought up earlier, or the Boo Brothers, which were the 80s ones, they're focused on Shaggy and Scooby and Scrappy. They're not the whole gang. Zombie Island is like the statement of, no, everyone's here. We're doing this.
And it's it's framed as we are getting the gang back together, right? We have Velma at the beginning trying to go off and do her own thing and kind of struggling, and everybody's feeling a little alienated at their jobs.
One of the best gags in the film is Scooby and Shaggy are working as, like, the people that do, like, the inspections at airports. Like, you're not allowed to take contraband in, and this is pre 9/11, so it's very lax. And so they're just vibing because Scooby's a sniff dog. So what happens when people take a bunch of illegal food onto board? That's right, Shaggy and Scooby eat all the fucking food, and their boss comes in and they're like, "You ate the whole food," and then Shaggy and Scooby, they're fat as hell, and they're like, "We saved you, little son, man," and they're doing shit like that.
If we could stay on that for a second. I was, it's been such a long time since I've engaged with any Scooby-Doo media, and I was surprised by just how overtly, like, cartoon logic it can be. Like, in my memory, Scooby-Doo is a fairly grounded show because, of course, all of the monsters are not real, and, we're in the real world in Scooby-Doo. But, of course, like, they eat a bunch of cheese and they grow, they have stomachs 10 times the size. And there's a lot of little things like that in this movie. Like another one is Scooby getting his head stuck in a hole and his nose becomes like this accordion thing. It's like this Chuck Jones kind of visual language that, I guess if you're more steeped in it, that is not surprising. But I don't usually think of Scooby Doo as a franchise that does that.
They doubled down on it with the Witch's Ghost. The next year, they doubled down on it even harder with that kind of contrast between the kind of like there's this visceral atmosphere, the drawings and the narrative, but we're also going to bring in that cartoonish sensibility. So a major plot point of that film is Shaggy and Scooby spending 10 minutes at this like New England inn and eating every single thing they have in the building, and they're walking out and they're fat, and then the witch's ghost turns up and they can't run away properly, and then they run the fat off for the next scene. It's good.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if anyone's seen The Witch's Ghost, but that was the other one. That's the other one that kind of fucked me up because of the weird turkey things that are giant mutated freaks. And the pumpkins with legs.
I do not remember turkeys. I do remember, though, I know this is one that people have a lot of nostalgia for that movie, too. I think mostly because of the characters, the Hex Girls.
The Hex Girls are
it's kind of like the trio in Hocus Pocus. They like just somehow lodge themselves in the brains of people who were kids at the time.
Hex Girls! Everyone knows Hex Girls also appear in the Legend of the Vampire, where they go to an Australian music festival. The Hex Girls are playing there, so the Hex Girls come back. Not as much as many would like, but
speaking of Hex Girls, there's music in this. There are three different songs,
and they're all great.
I don't know about that. They're definitely something. The lyrics are just so front and center, like telling you how you're supposed to feel about this. Like the scene where they're running away from all the zombies and everybody's kind of split up doing their own thing. What is actually happening between the characters and the zombies is never really that scary. They're kind of like doing pratfalls and different types of like slapstick gags. But the voice in the music is telling you that it's terror time. You're supposed to feel scared right now, which, I guess when I was a kid that worked. I remember being scared by this movie, but it's just not at all when you're an adult.
The thing is, right, see when you're older and you see the zombies running at them and they're running away, and then fucking that song starts playing, it's impossible for me to not just go, yeah, let's go, terror time. I'm fucking pumped.
You mentioned before that this is kind of like a reimagination, just kind of reigniting interest in Scooby Doo, and it seems like Scooby Doo has been kind of a franchise that has been able to reinvent itself for various different. Even though Scoob, the new one, as you said, Logan is terrible, it's still it's just an attempt to engage with have this franchise engage with the audience that would be interested in it at this point in time. So I guess for y'all, what about Scooby Doo seems like it has that kind of that flexibility to it just has that. It seems to be something that can connect with various generations. It's not just something for kids of the 60s or 70s. It connects with. It's very multi-generational.
Well, I think there's two main things to it. There's obviously like a varying degree of things. Well, number one, there's three actually. Number one is that generally it's consistent. Regardless of what Scooby-Doo property you pick up, like what show you're watching, what movie you pick on, generally you're gonna have a good time. Like the quality's there. Like you might not love it, because maybe you're not like a big Scooby-Doo person, but I think even like people that aren't like big cartoon fans could watch the Scooby-Doo episode or a Scooby-Doo movie from any era and be like, that was fun. Yeah, I'm glad that was on. I'm not complaining that I watched that. Number two is that I think there's always this kind of fascination throughout humanity, throughout age groups about mysteries. People really like seeing things unravel. They like figuring things out. They like learning about things. They like the kind of like what's going on under the mask kind of thing. And Scooby-Doo provides that. It's the introduction to like people that are really into like true crime, people that are really into like mystery novels and stuff. It's the first stage of that kind of fascination with understanding reveals and understanding suspense and trying to figure out the pieces of the puzzle. I think that was my first experience with Scooby Doo, which led to like me doing like those investigate books and then like doing like mystery solvings around the place in real life or like reading other books and stuff. But I honestly think that the main core of the series and why it lasts so long is because there's just this honest friendship to it. Like, look at Shaggy and Scooby. They're best fucking buds. How can you look at Shaggy and Scooby munching on food together and be like, I don't care about these two people. You care about Shaggy and Scooby. They're best friends and we love them all. Or Fred and Velma and Daphne. They're all such clearly distinct characters. Like everyone knows the Fred Jones archetype. Everyone knows Daphne and Velma, and especially Shaggy and Scoob. And the ways that they all interact is just always so interesting and always so funny. And it changes depending on the context because there are different elements that focus on Velma or focus on Fred, especially with the series of the direct-to-video era where it was like there were genuinely different stories. Like there was one, Scooby Doo, Where's My Mummy, which focuses on Velma outside of the gang and how that changes the dynamic up because like Fred and Daphne are the ones that are used to being like the successful ones of the pair. They're the ones who could leave the gang behind and do their own thing, and not Velma. That doesn't make sense. She's the behind the scenes person. And there's this interesting dynamics between all five of them, especially when they introduce like other characters like Scrappy, who most people don't like, but I have a fondness for the little shit. I just have this. He's a little puppy. He's got cute ears. Like he's a bit of an annoyance, but
he's Scrappy.
He's Scrappy Dappy Doo, and Scrappy Dappy Doo. I'm not doing impressions.
Andrew,
well,
Ash, what about y'all's?
To save it, another answer that I have to this question of like why there's something cross-generational or universal here. A thought that I had when watching the opening of this movie where they're in this like big gothic castle running away from this big like bat monster thing is I miss hand-drawn animation. Like we just don't have a lot of it anymore. And there is something about it that doesn't age. I remember realizing that Scooby Doo was a thing that started in the 60s when I was in like high school. And I was like, what? Scooby Doo didn't come out when I was a kid? But no, I was just watching reruns from the 60s that I didn't even realize were reruns because hand-drawn animation doesn't age. So I think that there's just something kind of timeless about the look and the feel and the texture of it. And even those like canned audio tracks that they recycle in every episode that just kind of always feels somewhat new, right? Or always feels like it's in the present. Ash, anything else?
I just love the gang and the Mystery Machine. One of my neighbor had this like Mystery Machine toy, and I was always so jealous of it growing up. I loved it so much, but I think they could, like, Scooby Doo's a thing where I think they could just keep making Scooby Doo movies, and I think that would be great. Like, I'm honestly like, I want to make a Scooby Doo movie like right now.
Well, unfortunately, they still are in their shit, right? Like Scoob was.
Well, to be fair, the only one that has been bad that I've ever seen in my entire life is that one. They are all because they still do the direct-to-video ones.
That's why I really think they should do like another live-action one, and I want to be involved.
I tweeted to one of my friends, Michael Snydell, I think yesterday, where I was like, my dream job is legitimately to write a Scooby-Doo movie.
Oh my god!
I want to do it so badly. I would do such a good job on it.
We're promoting you right now, right? We're giving you a little bit of more spotlight on your Scooby-Doo expertise.
All I'm saying is, Hanna-Barbera, let me write a Scooby-Doo movie. It can be like 60 minutes long. You don't even have to do anything with it. You can just like not release it. Just let me do it and let me see it, and then I can leave. It's fine.
Have you thought about this? What would happen in your Scooby-Doo movie?
Well, basically, it's gotta have like.
You can't spill all the secrets.
Yeah, you gotta leave.
I can't spill all
more.
the secrets, but I think that the idea. I think there's a good way to do it, And the best Scooby-Doo movies are in confined locations. So you get to know a time and a place and the specific characters in this place very, very well. So what I'm thinking is a resort. They're going skiing, right? They're going skiing. Daphne's really pumped up about it. Fred's a little bit nervous, but he's not
That's totally
pretending.
Daphne and Fred's thing.
He's just going along. He loves Daphne, so he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it, guys. Come on!" But he's a little scared because that's what Fred's like. He's trying to cover it up. And then Velma's just like, "Guys, I don't want to do skiing. I'm gonna stay and do math and shit like that." And then Shaggy and Scooby are like, "That's cool. We're gonna make some burgers and we're gonna eat a bunch of the food." So they go up and they're gonna they eat all the nice food in the resort. They go to the resort cafeteria. They eat all the shit up. But then what happens? Big snowstorm. They're trapped in the resort. And what's going on? There's a spooky masked thing going around causing disruption. What's happening in this building? Let's investigate. We're going to have to split up to cover the different grounds of the resort. There are a bunch of side characters who could be involved in some way that we do not know yet. And over the course of 60 minutes, we get a sense of personality, a sense of location. We get to see 5 different characters interact in a fun location. And it ends with a satisfying reveal that ties everything together and makes you go, I would watch that again. That's fun. I'll show my kid that. That's it. It's just stuff like that. I would watch the shit.
I support this.
So there's so many. There's so many locations you can set a Scooby-Doo thing. You could set a Scooby-Doo thing on the moon. That could be the information they're telling us. That Scooby-Doo is moved to the moon.
NASA has an announcement. The next Scooby-Doo movie is set on the moon.
Scooby-Doo movie.
The NASA announcement. The NASA announcement is made by Ruby Roo. Oh my gosh. Honestly, there is.
I was gonna say, I thought there was one when they went to space.
There was one. Yeah. They go into the internet. Is that what happens in that?
Cyberspace is going. Cyber chase. That's going into a video game.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a video game based on their life.
Andrew, it's Cyber Chase.
So they go through the Roman Colosseums, and then at the end they see their own digital versions of themselves. It's so deep. It was like Marjorie Prime.
Yes.
It's like Marjorie.
For Scooby-Doo.
Just like
the end of Cyber
Prime.
Chase. It's the same thing. But I just fucking love one of my favorite jokes in the history of cinema. And it's not necessarily like a joke, but it's like in terms of pure laugh riot. Shaggy, Scooby, the hot Louisiana Peppers. It is a fucking classic set piece. Because they're so overconfident, they're so cocky about it. Like, they're food experts. We can handle this, and they do not handle it well at all.
That match cut with the eyeball is
so good.
Hitchcock wishes.
Hitchcock has never made a movie as good as Scooby-Doo.
Wow.
I sincerely believe that.
He gave it his best shot.
Rear Window's close, but not quite. Marnie's pretty good. But if Marnie had Scooby-Doo in it investigating the crime of Marnie, then it would be
I do think that would be an improvement on Marnie. I really do.
I just really love Scooby, and I think all movies would be benefited if he was there. Like, what's the talking dog who loves to snack gonna take away from your movie, huh? Like, what's it gonna do? Like, I feel like Bellatar movies would be less depressing if Scooby was there.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask if you could put Scooby in one movie, what would it be? But maybe it's Satan Tango.
Yeah, Satan Tango. I'd put him in something fucking god awful, so I would have some consolation. I'd put him in Ammonite. If Scooby-Doo was in Ammonite, then I could have a good time with it. Like, I don't have to watch these fucking boring rock girls. I could just go watch Scooby have a snack on some like Northern English town's fish supply or something. But that's a deviation. I love the gags in this movie.
Any final thoughts on Zombie Island? I don't know. They don't make them like they used to.
They don't make him like the thing about the mystery of this movie, the central mystery of this movie, it's fucking disturbing when you're 6. Like, these women have their culture destroyed by a bunch of weird soldiers, and they get turned into cat ladies, and they fucking
It is
kill
really
people.
weird how the speaking of the ladies getting their culture destroyed, like, it's weird that their culture is worshiping cat gods.
I mean,
so we pray to our cat god, and I was like, come again? You pray to your cat god?
Girls, and we believe in the cats.
But also, like, it's really weird how, unprompted, this movie decides to delve into colonialism and the Civil War. Doesn't really engage with either of those things, but it's like, hey, we're gonna smash together Confederate soldiers and this weird quasi-indigenous group that we made up. And
put some voodoo in there.
Throw some voodoo in there.
Look.
Yes, it's odd.
Look, is Zombie Island culturally sensitive? Probably not.
Probably not. It is better than Rear Window, though.
Here. Yeah, it is. If there's anyone, I would genuinely be interested if anyone watched Zombie Island and was genuinely like puzzled by its depiction beyond okay, sure. Let's do it.
I mean,
like,
that's really all you can say.
Like, it's just like, it just fucking rips. I don't know how else to put it. They're cat ladies and they killed the Confederates. Like, I don't know what to say about that. It's fucking rules.
Yeah.
But the Confederates are the good guys?
No, they
We're
disappear into
happy
sands
that
of
the
dust.
Confederates. Well, but we're happy the Confederates saved them from the cat girls.
I think that they lost any...
As a sentence I would not have expected to say today.
I think they lost any form of relatability to the Confederacy after 100 years of death.
Sure.
I don't think they remember.
I don't know. Those ghosts are
strength.
probably still pretty racist.
I
don't know if their views have evolved
the
in the last
zombie
100
gets
years.
back together. It is allowed to speak one phrase before its body falls apart and its mind goes to the never place. And all it says is, "Did the South win the war?"
Yeah, I don't know where we went. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm wrapping it up. We'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we posted all the movies we talked about in this episode, except for whatever movie we were getting into before I cut this thing off. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Cinematary. Thank you so much to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Christina Daughtry, Cindy Roberts, Harry Eskin, Hell Yeah Small World, Joe Jordan, Maggie, Ron Hayes, the kittiest of kittens, Titus Arthur, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we will be concluding our Horror for Kids series with 2009's Coraline, which will include us having... another scholar. We'll have the Coraline scholar. That is Andrew.
It's me. It is the best kids
It's not Zombie Island. Sorry.
Objectively.
So. No, you're right. No, Andrew, chill out on
cat
this.
gods, then maybe.
There is a cat who seems somewhat omniscient in that movie.
But does the cat create an army of zombies that hunt Shaggy and Scooby down on an island? No, it does not. So.
You got me there.
Yeah, it has less Confederates.
Confederates.
I mean, those parents are pretty suspicious. That's all I'm gonna say.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.